This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We end today's show with a look at the latest news on the world's richest man, Elon Musk. This week, French prosecutors have asked Musk to appear for questioning following a police raid on the offices of Musk's social media network, X, in Paris. The raid was part of an investigation into the distribution of child sexual abuse images. The French probe comes on the heels of two separate investigations by the UK and the European Union into Musk's AI tool Grok over sexual deepfakes. Last year, the European Union fined X the equivalent of $140 million over hate speech and misinformation. Writing on X after the raid in Paris on Tuesday, Musk said, quote, "This is a political attack."
Earlier this week, Elon Musk also announced SpaceX, his rocket and satellite business, has acquired his artificial intelligence startup, xAI. The estimated $1.25 trillion merger comes as Musk has said he wants to build 1 million solar-powered data centers in space. Elon Musk also shows up in the newly released Jeffrey Epstein files. In one email, he asked Epstein, quote, "What day, night will be the wildest party on your island," unquote. He wrote that email on Christmas Day. For more on all of this, we're joined by Boston University professor of international history, Quinn Slobodian, author of the forthcoming book with Ben Tarnoff, Muskism, A Guide for the Perplexed. Let's start off, Professor Slobodian, with that raid on Musk's headquarters in Paris. Talk about what happened there, and then we'll talk about his connections to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, the raid in Paris is the culmination of a one-year investigation that began in last January over algorithm manipulation and foreign interference, and has since expanded, as you suggested, to now 7 charges ranging from CSAM to sexualized deepfakes to Holocaust denial, and still this question of algorithm manipulation. And it's a part of a kind of a pushback that we're seeing now against Musk that's probably more forceful than anything we've seen to date. The Spanish Prime Minister similarly announced forthcoming plans to ban children on the social media platforms, including Grok and X. And not mentioned, but Malaysia and Indonesia actually blocked Grok in the late of last year, and have only recently opened it up again, too. So this is all, I think, a real significant backlash to the decision, which was a business decision that Musk made in late December and early January to encourage users on Grok to use the service to produce artificially generated erotic images of strangers without their consent. And this is something that was done at the rate of, in some cases at its peak, thousands of times an hour. Over 2 million images of this kind were created. The Center for Countering Digital Hate estimates that about 20,000 of those were of children. So this is clearly a red line that has been crossed, and especially in the European Union and beyond, there is some significant pushback now against these kind of actions.
Well, Quinn, do you expect that there will be similar actions taken elsewhere, as happened in Paris, and the fact that the problem with X is not just, of course, these were particularly egregious, the distribution of sexual deepfakes, as well as the Holocaust denial content, but there's a lot of other extremely damaging and injurious false information that circulates on these platforms.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you mentioned in the intro, there already has been a major fine levied against Musk in December by the European Commission about the use of the platform to mislead users. So the use of the blue check verification system, which suggests kind of sources of authority that are not in fact sources of authority, are used to juice the kind of political messages that Musk himself wants to get across, which are now absolutely indistinguishable from the most extreme political demands of the European far right, most notably the demand for the remigration, quote unquote, of non-white residents of Europe is something that until very recently was only ever heard on the extreme fringes. Even a party like the Alternative for Germany party wouldn't have used terms like that. And now it's frequently propagated and circulated by Musk in ways that, rightly enough now, even parties of the center-right, and the center-left across Europe feel like has gone from free speech into the space of disinformation and foreign interference. So indeed, I do think that the question of liability now for the kind of actions that are produced as an outcome of speech circulated on X has entered into a new zone of regulation for Europe in a way that it hasn't before.
And Quinn, could you also talk about this earlier this week, SpaceX acquiring xAI? This is the largest merger in history, which could potentially make Musk into a trillionaire.
Yeah, this is really extraordinary. The merger of xAI, which is his AI company, which is the parent company of X.com, into SpaceX, produces this $1.5 trillion valued behemoth, the largest private company by far in the world. And the proportions inside of that company are worth thinking about. So X is only about 1 to 2% of the total value of the Musk empire. And yet we have a disproportionate sort of amount of attention that goes to it because I think it plays a disproportionately important role. It is the kind of mouthpiece, it's the platform, it's the place where Musk is able to deliver his ideology in the most unfiltered way. And it's the place where he does his best to kind of build consent for really what is the extreme far-right position that he's trying to construct a new social reality on the basis of. So the X story is a tiny one inside of the grand story of SpaceX. The grand story of SpaceX is one that, as of last Friday, includes, as alluded to at the top, a request filed with the FCC to launch, quote-unquote, up to 1 million satellites into orbit around the Earth. To put that in context, at present, Starlink, the satellite part of SpaceX, has a bit over 9,000 satellites, which is already 60% of the satellites in orbit. To raise that up to 1 million is nothing less than the most audacious land grab in human history, in this case, a land grab for space, with the idea that that will then become a layer really encasing the Earth of data centers, which will be able to, he hopes, catapult his so far lagging AI company past the competitors and provide universal broadband access for the Earth citizens below. So the scale of the ambitions is really, really breathtaking, in fact.
Quinn, before we go, though, I wanted to ask you about the connections between Musk and Epstein. With French prosecutors investigating X for potential complicity in the possession and distribution of child sexual abuse material, investigating with Europol, you also have this release of millions of pages of documents with Elon Musk mentioned a number of times. Can you talk about that and maybe make that connection?
Sure. Especially during the feud with Trump last year, Musk made a great deal of hay on his own distance from Epstein and his own kind of moral condemnation of him, and used it as a way to kind of tar his rivals and his opponents in that moment. What we know now, based on the latest cache of documents, is that far from keeping arm's distance, he was actually in semi-regular contact with Epstein and made very clear plans to come and visit him on his island to party, as he put it in the emails. So the distance that was claimed to be there was actually nothing of this sort, and he's quite clearly as enmeshed in this toxic Epstein network as the very people he was criticizing.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.